My name is Loren Schoenberg, and I'm the Executive Director of the Jazz Museum in Harlem, and it's my great pleasure to welcome everyone to our office this evening, because tonight is an evening that I've been looking forward to for a long, long time. And the reason I've been looking forward to it, that this is a woman who I've known and met and respected for, probably 25, 30 years since I moved to New York and became aware of Carline Ray. But the way that the music business is, and also in the investigation that we've done, well, investigation is the wrong word, reading about your wonderful career and all the things that you're doing. Now I can understand why we never really had time to sit down and talk for a long time, because you're too busy doing all the things that you do. And I've been looking forward to tonight so much, just to find out the hows and the whys and the wherefores of this incredibly talented person who we're humbled to have her here this evening and to honor her at the Jazz Museum. What more can I say than Carline Ray? Have a seat. We have some water for you here.
Yeah, that's my water.
Yeah.
Now he's going to get into my business.
Only to the degree that you let me. Anyway, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for asking me.
You're more than welcome. I'd like to start, Carline, by just asking you how, with all the different things that you do and all the different things that you've done. Some people know you as a bassist. Some people know you as a vocalist.
Right.
Some people as a vocalist in many different ranges, as an educator, as a person who's been involved in so many varieties of activity. How do you represent yourself if you're going to teach a class or something like that? How do you characterize your occupation?
Let me see, I don't necessarily characterize my occupation more than to say that I put myself in the student's place. You know, I try to think of ways of teaching and making my information understood by trying to think like the students would think. Now, what would they want me to do? You know, that. And I started doing that when I started teaching at the McBride College in Brooklyn. It's now a university, but at that time, back in the 70s, it was just a college. 2-year, I think it was a 2-year college at the time, at its beginning. But the thing is that I was called on by a colleague of mine with whom I had played in the Sweethearts of Rhythm. She was a bass player, and she and I went to the Juilliard school together. But we met actually on the line waiting to register at Juilliard back in the 40s. But the method that I used was not something that I just preconceived. I just wanted to put myself in a position that would best serve the students, period. It's just that simple. I had no method at that time.
Well, as I mentioned, is my mic a lot louder than hers?
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Okay, let me give you yours.
Well, don't worry about the loudness of the mic, because I have enough mouth for 3 or 4 rows of teeth, so you'll hear me sooner or later anyhow.
I'd like to ask you a question, just to start off, since we are recording these things for the archives. Just a bit of background. When were you born?
Oh, okay. This is the $64,000 question. I was born on April 21st, 1925. Right here in Harlem, at the little hospital that I was born in was a private hospital, beautiful little brownstone in 136th Street between 8th and Edgecombe, and it's still there, privately owned now, I'm assuming. But my family doctor was I don't know where else he practiced, but that's where I was born, in the 300 block of 136th Street, across the street from PS 136, which is the junior high school that I went to, Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Was Ray the name when you were born, or is that a...
Yes, Ray is my family name. That's the name I was born with. Where my father got the name Carline, I will never know, but I looked it up in the dictionary one day, and it's my name is the French version of Carline, C-A-R-L-I-N-E, although people are more subject to want to spell it E-N-E or E-E-N or E-A-N, but it's C-A-R-L-I-N-E.
How did the Ray family come to Harlem?
Well, my mom was born here in New York City. In fact, I'm second generation down in Hell's Kitchen, where I live. She was born in New York City. And my dad came from Mobile, Alabama. He was a graduate of the Tuskegee Institute. And he taught there for a little bit, and one of his, I was trying to think of one of his professors, can't think of the name now, but anyway, I'm having a senior moment right now, but you will understand that. Nevertheless, he was a very distinguished musician himself, and he came up to New York City. Now, don't ask me how my mom and dad met, because I really don't know, because it was never discussed in the family. Not that it was a big secret, but nevertheless, it was not a topic of conversation in my house. But my mom was, as I said, was born in the Hell's Kitchen area of New York City. And she was 36 years older than I am. I'm 80, so that would make her about 116 now, something like that, if she was still living. And my dad, too. They were both the same age.
Mm-hmm. And their names?
Well, my father's name was Elisha Manasseh Ray. I'm assuming that his folks wanted him to be a preacher. I don't know, but those are biblical names. Yeah. And my mom was Mary Catherine Baker. That was her maiden name.
And any siblings, Carline?
I have a sister who's sitting right here.
Oh.
That's my sister. Just the two of us. And she's a few years younger than I am. You tell them how, if you want them to know how old you are. I'm not going to tell them.
I didn't ask, she did. Let's get that straight. So, Carline, for folks who are going to be looking at this interview and wanting to know about your background and the world that you were born into, can you paint a picture for us of that block where you grew up, and where was the block where you grew up, and what was it like?
Okay. Well, I grew up on 7th Avenue and 148th Street. For anybody who's familiar with the demographics in Harlem. But, the first building I remember growing up in was 2566 7th Avenue, which was between 148th and 149th Street on 7th Avenue. That was like a half a block away from the Dunbar apartments. And I can remember vividly the neighborhood, because it was a very interesting neighborhood. It was a neighborhood that reflected many different nationalities. Grocer was Irish, butcher was German, vegetable man was Armenian, our cleaners, his shop, he was West Indian, from the Caribbean. I don't know which one of the islands, but that was like a very representative area as far as business was concerned. But it was, and too, the year I was born, there was still a lot of white people living in Harlem at the time. So it was very diverse.
What was the neighborhood like in terms of your friends, where you went to school, where the theaters were, where the churches were?
Well, I went to school in PS 90, which was down the block from my house, actually. So it meant that I was on time to school most of the time, but once in a while I would be late. Not that late, but late enough to be considered late to school. And I remember my mom used to put on a clean dress on me every day, and I'd have my handkerchief pinned to my dress and so forth. But back in those days, all the teachers that I could remember were outstanding educators. Like my kindergarten teacher, Miss Mahler. I remember her very distinctly, and she gave me a good start in school. But things were much more simple, much simpler in those days. Things were not as complicated as they have become in this era, in this particular part of well, this is another century now, but nevertheless, things were much simpler. There weren't the complications that there are now. And my mom, I remember when we used to go to once in a while, my mom and I used to go to the movie house, the Roosevelt Theater on 145th Street and 7th Avenue. And one day the cashier said to me, she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, miss, I can't let you in. You have to go home and get your mother." I said, "Well, this is my mother." And she was about down here on me. She was 4'9". She was very cute. But anyway, all the kids I grew up with, some of them, in fact, one or two of them, we're still in touch with to this day. And I've seen some of the others in different parts of the city. One kid I grew up with, Tommy Williams, his brother's name was Nat Williams. He was a very fine jazz pianist, but unfortunately Nat died. I don't remember what was the cause of his demise, but Tommy lives out in Long Island to this day. So I mean, every now and then I run into somebody who I grew up with.
I've heard that at that time in Harlem, communities and neighborhoods were different in the sense that everyone looked out for each other, and if one misbehaved, one heard about it,
Yes,
and all
that's
that.
true.
Could you paint a picture and talk to people about what that was like?
Well, it was the kind of thing where, well, for instance, when I started going to junior high school, I went with a young lady who lived on the other side of the street in my block, 148th Street, and we would go down to 8th Avenue to get the streetcar to go to school, and the streetcar was on 8th Avenue. Now, back in those days, there was an elevated line, railway, over the 8th Avenue, over 8th Avenue, over 6th Avenue, 3rd Avenue. I mean, now that I think about it, things are very much different now than they used to be then. But I used to go to school with a young lady named Gloria Lipset. She had siblings, a couple of brothers. One was a doctor. She had two younger sisters. And I would go to their house from time to time for dinner or just to visit, just to say hi and talk to Mrs. Lipset. Mr. Lipset had a shoe store on 7th Avenue between 145th and 144th. And he was the last person that I ever saw make shoes. He was a cobbler. He was a shoe cobbler. I don't know where he got his materials, but the shoes were beautiful, beautiful leather shoes. And he was so sure that I was from the Caribbean that he was trying to make my mother come from Jamaica or one of the other more well-known islands. But nevertheless, I never really convinced Mr. Lipset that I was not Caribbean, not West Indian, because all my friends were, Anyway, but we all looked out for one another, and we palled around together. And then when I became a teenager, I did have a group of people that we all used to travel together and go to dances together. And back in those days, Glenn Miller's band was prominent. Duke Ellington, Count Basie. Let's see who else was prominent in those days.
Chick Webb?
No, that was before, something before my time.
Erskine Hawkins?
Erskine Hawkins, yes. Yes, Erskine Hawkins was in my particular.
Jimmy Lunsford?
Jim Lunsford was a little before my time, but nevertheless I caught it with him after a while. But the reason why I even mentioned Erskine Hawkins, well, I'm glad you did, because I had a chance to be his band vocalist after a little while. I was asked to become the band vocalist, and I was with him for about a year. And when we were in town, we were always at the Savoy. And I loved the Savoy because I loved to dance, and then the Savoy was just walking distance from my house. Because after a while, we moved from 2566 7th Avenue to 200 West 148th Street. And my dad liked a lot of sunshine, so we lived on the top floor. And in the morning, he'd throw up the shades, and let the sunshine in, and you could see the Yankee Stadium from our windows, across the East River. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you mentioned singing. How did how did music start to come into your life, Carline?
Well,
when and how?
To begin with, in my apartment, my dad had a lot of instruments that all belonged to him. I saw he had his euphonium, his tuba, a bass, and a guitar that I saw, and a violin too. That's right. There were about 5 or 6 different instruments in the apartment, and I got a chance to use one of them, which was the guitar. When I was becoming involved in some groups, different groups, there was a young lady who played guitar who didn't like to rehearse. So I asked Edna Smith, who was the bass player, if it was all right. In fact, she asked me, "Well, could you ask your dad if you could borrow that guitar I see up on top the top of your closet in your room?" So I asked my dad, and he said, "Sure, you can use it." You know, so I was really surprised at that, but I took very good care of him because he was very careful about his instruments. So that's how I got involved with stringed instruments, and I also belonged to a little group that in which we played violin, and so I had a chance to learn to play violin also. But
Were you self-taught, or were you studying in school, or?
I was self-taught as far as the guitar was concerned. I was self-taught. And also the violin, actually, I was self-taught too, because I wasn't studying with anybody at the time.
Was there music in the schools at that point?
There was, if I can remember correctly, yes, there was music in the schools because I was involved with the choruses. Any kind of chorus that was involved that was in existence in any school I went to, I was in it because I just loved to sing. I found out I had a voice, so I used to sing a lot that way.
So you're living up 148th Street, up in that area. I'm curious about the various neighborhoods in Harlem. The main cross streets, of course, there was 125th, 135th, 145th.
Yeah, and 7th Avenue itself was like the main street, in Harlem. And I remember my dad was, when he came back from World War I, in fact, he was overseas in World War I with James Reese Europe. Although I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that much about James Reese Europe at the time, but he was a tuba player, one of the tuba players with the James Reese Europe. And the thing of it is that since things were segregated in the Army, I know my dad couldn't have been with anybody else but James Reese Europe because he was the only well-known musician at the time that was overseas. And so, and my father used to tell me about how they used to wash up in their helmets. They wore tin helmets. And so he would shave and wash up and brush his teeth in his helmet. That was like a little sink, But anyway, so he came back home, but he never talked much about himself. But I will say that the reason even that I was influenced by the choice of school that he chose to go to, which was the Juilliard School of Music. But in those days, there weren't that many black students at the school. And my father told me that he was in the class that Frank Damrosch or Walter Damrosch, I forgot which one of the brothers was the professor of the orchestral instruments. So he offered my father a chair in the brass section, but my father didn't take it because my mom was carrying me at the time, and in those days they didn't have the sort of season that they have nowadays, But so my father chose to go into the post office because he knew he was gonna. Since he was expecting, my mother was expecting, he wanted to make sure that he had an income coming in.
Well, to get back to the question about the neighborhoods and the various places, and you mentioned when you started, you said that when you were growing up in Harlem, so you were born in 1925, as you said. Yes. So, all right, so we have 10 in 1935, 15 in 1940. And you mentioned there were still white folks living in Harlem at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering again if you could paint a picture of what the racial dynamism was. What was it like growing up in the Harlem of the 1930s? where did one go, where didn't one go, where could one work, where couldn't one work, all those things that are so vital that that story be told me.
Well,
'Cause
I being a little kid at the time back in the 30s until I got to the 40s, until we got to the 40s, I just went wherever my dad took us. You know, we had a family car, a little 1934 Ford, four-door Ford. I remember that car, and we would go to, well, I would go to camp every summer, or almost every summer, and my dad was a very good cook, and he used to actually, he knew I liked chocolate cake, so every time he would come up to camp, he'd bring a nice, gorgeous chocolate cake, which I used to share with the kids in my tent. We used to go to Niagara Falls in some summers. Wherever my father decided the family would go, I was right there with them, because I mean, you know, what else was I gonna do? And when it came to work, now there were several businesses in 125th Street that did not hire black folks. I'm trying to remember one of the restaurants in particular. And Bloomstein's was a department store where my father bought all of our clothes. And I didn't care too much for the the things that he picked for me to wear, so that's what that got me to thinking about making some of my own clothes, and that's how I taught myself to sew. Because my mom was little, as I said, she was only 4'10", and so back in those days they didn't make half sizes. Back in the early days, and my mom was certainly too tiny for some of the things that would have to be adjusted for her. So she was my guinea pig, so to speak. So I learned how to sew, and I would make things for her. Then I started making things for myself. So that's how I got around not wearing some of the clothes that my dad wanted me to wear. He was very, he was a very, how shall we say?
Strong character.
Strong character. But he was very domineering, let's put it that way. So, you know, what he said went, whether he was right or wrong. You know, you just didn't argue with him.
you grew up, as you mentioned, very, very close to the Savoy Ballroom. And of course, the Savoy Ballroom was one of those fabled places.
Yes.
So as someone who actually went there, once again, I was asking if you could paint a picture of it for those of us who never saw it.
The reason why I went there, as I said before, was because I love to dance. And I used to watch the Harlem Harvest Moon Ball dancers. And in fact, Frankie Manning was one of those people. For those of you who may be familiar with Frankie Manning, he's still around. He's 90 years old, 91, 90. Yeah, still dancing, looking good.
Yes.
Looking so good. And so I went there actually to audition for Erskine Hawkins, because I had made friends. I used to make friends with all the guitar players when we were on the road. When I was on the road with the Sweethearts of Rhythm. So the one guitarist that I was very friendly with was the guitarist with the Erskine Hawkins band. I can't think of his nickname. But anyway, he told me when I come back to New York City, come over to the Savoy and whenever I had a chance, and sing for Erskine Hawkins. So I did that night, and the manager of the Savoy came over to me. He says, "Young lady, I like the way you sing, and I want to tell you what I'm going to do for you. From now on, when you come to the Savoy, you won't ever have to pay again to get in." And he was true to his word, because but I did become the vocalist with the Sweethearts, with the Erskine Hawkins band for about a year. So we traveled all over the country, and those were interesting days. Going down south in particular, if you know what I mean. But there's an education wherever you go, as long as you don't carry a chip on your shoulder. Just go and take things as they are, and whatever cards you're dealt, you work with them. That's it, you know. But you don't cause any trouble. But the thing is that this was my introduction to segregation, so to speak, is what I'm trying to say. And we had some very interesting times, both in the Sweethearts and with Erskine Hawkins, because there were times when you didn't, well, regardless of wherever you went, we had to, like if we wanted something to eat, we couldn't stop and go into a restaurant. We had to go around to the back where the kitchen was and get whatever we wanted, if they had it, and if they chose to wait on us. And most of the time down south, we stayed in private homes, or we ate at what we called some greasy spoons, greasy spoon restaurants. But the food was good for the most part, and we just did the best we could under the circumstances. And I found it very interesting because I remember one day I went into a dress shop to buy a dress for some particular occasion that we were going someplace with the Sweethearts of Rhythm I'm referring to now. And I walked into the shop. Of course, down south, as the black person, if you're going into a shop in those days, the sales lady or salesman could tell immediately if you were from that area or from somewhere else, because they could tell from your body language, the way you talk to them, and so forth. And you didn't have a southern accent, or even if you did. I remember this lady, I went to buy this beautiful dress, and the lady said, they call you customers. What can I do for you, customer? I said, well, I would love to have a nice, not too fancy, but a nice party dress for a particular occasion. So she showed me something nice, and I tried it on, and she says, my goodness, customer, you sure smell good. I don't know what that was supposed to be about. I don't dare to say. I don't care to say. Nevertheless, I got the dress, and I never thought about, well, even down in Washington, D.C., I remember, you could ride on a bus, go across the Potomac to Virginia, or someplace anywhere south of Washington, D.C., sitting anywhere you wanted. But when you came back to Washington, D.C., you had to sit in the back of the bus. So that was my introduction to that sort of thing, you know. But there were all sorts of little incidents like that. But and one night, we were, our bus driver with the Sweethearts was asking somebody for directions. And this person said, oh yeah, okay, follow me, I'll show you. And so he led us to a road where the overhead space was not high enough for our bus, and he knew it, so he just, as soon as the front part of the bus hit this overhead, he sped off, you know. But it wasn't the damage to the front of the bus was just where the sign was, but we were lucky we weren't going faster, or what could have been really disastrous. And one time when we were down in Salem, I forgot which state. Anyway, it might have been North Carolina, yeah. Well, in any case, it was down south. And we were playing for a group of beautiful young people who were having their high school prom. Thank you. I need all the help I can get. And so we were playing and having a good time, and everything was going along swimmingly until intermission. And so I said to the band boy, I said, I see a little puff of smoke over there in the corner by the curtains. And so the band boy went over there, and when he pulled the curtain back, all this smoke, and not flames yet, but smoke, just came out from nowhere. Somebody probably had started a fire in the basement of the auditorium. The fire department was right across the street, and they took their own good time getting there. Now the bandstand eventually burned down and fell into the basement. And I had my guitar, and my guitar case was underneath the piano. I forgot about the case. I just took my guitar and jumped off the stage. And we lost a lot of our music, unfortunately, too, in that particular incident. But nobody was hurt, thank God, but we lost some music that night, yeah.
But you've mentioned in passing many times a legendary name of a legendary band, and people who are not from that era may not remember Ina Ray Hutton or Phil Spitalny or some of these other...
I was aware of those particular all-female bands, yeah.
I'm sure you were, because you were in one of the greatest. And so I'm wondering, again, if you could just tell everyone who may not know about the International Sweethearts of Rhythm, about how you found out about them, about just everything that we'd like to know about
well,
that great band.
this is an interesting incident, that the way I got into the Sweethearts of Rhythm, and Edna Smith plays a part in this too, because she was the bass player. One day we were coming from our agent's office. Nat Nazaro was our agent.
Nat Nazaro?
You remember Nat Nazaro? Oh, you're older than I think you are.
No. I worked with Bobby Short for many years.
Oh, okay.
And he used to tell a story in his act every night about Nat Nazaro and all the acts that he kind of owned.
Yeah. In fact, one of the acts was Stump and Stumpy,
right.
And Harold Cromer lives in the other building of 484.
I'll probably never, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'll probably never have a chance to tell this story again because it just wouldn't come up because that name is never mentioned. But when Bobby would mention Nat Nazaro, he would say, well, he said, Nat Nazaro was not really loved by the people who he booked. And when they told Jackie Moms Mabley that Nat Nazaro had died, she said, that's good. That's the end of my little story. I never met the man.
Yeah, Moms was something else. But anyway, to get back to the way I got into the Sweethearts, to cut it a little short here.
Don't cut it short.
Don't cut it short?
No, please. No.
Oh, all right.
And I'm serious.
Okay. Well, anyway, we were coming from Nat Nazaro's office, and Edna was carrying her bass on her back, as she always did, and we were walking on down Broadway to go to the subway. So this gentleman came up to Edna and he says, "Excuse me, ma'am, but are you a musician? Don't I know you?" So Edna says, I'm sorry, sir, but if you're not a musician, I don't have time to talk to you today. I'm trying to get home." He says, "No, allow me to introduce myself. My name is, oh gosh, what was his last name? See, I'm really having some..."
It's okay.
Maurice, he was the musical director of the Sweethearts of Rhythm at the time. I'm trying to think of, it'll come to me. Maurice was his first name anyway. He was a very fine musician, arranger, composer, and so forth, and he did all the arranging for the Sweethearts of Rhythm. So he told us what his purpose in approaching us was. He was looking for some girls to replace people who were leaving the Sweethearts of Rhythm, and our configuration, which was piano, bass, and guitar, was just what he was looking for. So we said to him, "Well, if you want information, we can go back upstairs to our agent's office, and you can get all the information if you want to take pictures or whatever you need." And at that time, I was in my graduation, in my senior year at the Juilliard School, and so I wasn't going to let anything get in the way of my graduation after all the work I did, blood, sweat, and tears, and so forth. But nevertheless, it was a wonderful opportunity, and I really enjoyed being at this Juilliard School. But nevertheless, they wanted us there in May. This was May, and we were joining the Sweethearts of Rhythm, and I, and Jackie King was the pianist, and we were joining the Sweethearts of Rhythm in St. Louis. So, and I had never been west of New Jersey, so St. Louis was like California from distance-wise for me. But nevertheless, after graduation, which was the 16th or 17th of May, I was ready to join the Sweethearts of Rhythm, and Edna had already gone out to St. Louis, and I was on my way. Mr. King knew, Maurice King.
Okay.
Mr. King knew that we were all coming, and we made ourselves informational. I mean, we let him know that when we were coming. So anyway, we got out there, and so this was something new for me because I'd never been. And the name of the train was the Spirit of St. Louis, and it went from New York to St. Louis. I mean, that was the regular run for this particular train on Amtrak. So then began all the fun. I mean, meeting musicians everywhere. I mean, I met so many different musicians. Nat King Cole and his group, and Billy Eckstein, and Count Basie and the band, and Duke Ellington. Some of the towns that we stayed in, everybody stayed at the same hotel. All the black musicians stayed at the same hotels. And so St. Louis was one of those places. And so we had a very eventful, to say the least, tour on the road. And our bus was a special bus. We had a bus that had upper and lower berths, like on a train, a Pullman train. And so everybody was assigned to a particular berth. And there was a little bathroom in the back. And so, of course, whenever the Sweethearts of Rhythm, any of us stepped out to go any place, we had that bandbox look, as you want to call it, you know. We all were nice and squeaky clean, and, you know, looked very neat and everything. So Mr. Nora Lee King was like the custodian for the girls, you know. She kept an eye on all of us to make sure everything was cool. Now, when we would come to the Apollo Theater in New York, I remember some of the guys used to come up and I was trying to think who used to check out Pauline Brady.
Was she the drummer?
Yes, she was the drummer. Right. And so we all had our custodians, you might say. People would come up and sort of like be like big brothers to us, you know, to make sure that everything was okay and everybody had everything they needed and so forth. And so that was a particular incident that I looked forward to working at the Apollo, because we always had it was very exciting, and we played maybe 3 or 4 shows a day, maybe 5 or on the weekends, believe it or not. And in fact, you really meet yourself coming back on stage, so to speak. And that's no lie, that was the truth, believe me when I tell you. But anyway, that was all part of the experience of being on the road, you know. And so it was the kind of thing that I never forgot. And Mom's Mabley, in particular, funny lady. I knew her routine almost word for word, but I would fall out of my chair laughing and knew what was coming.
Right.
She was just funny, just a naturally funny lady. Very nice person.
Who are some of the other, now again, you're playing at the Apollo Theater, you're on the road playing with all these wonderful places. Who are some of the acts, like you mentioned Mom's Mabley, who are some of the acts that just stick out?
Okay, Ella Fitzgerald and Ray Brown. In fact, in those days, they were married, yeah. And so, excuse me, one day, we were at I can't remember the name of the theater in Detroit.
The Paradise.
Thank you. The Paradise. Boy, thank you for all the help. You all making my interview. Anyway, okay, at the Paradise in Detroit, that was a beautiful theater. And the hotel where we were staying was like a fireproof hotel. I found out the hard way one night.
Fireproof?
Yeah, it was fireproof. At least the rugs were. I accidentally dropped my iron. I was pressing something, and I dropped my iron on the rug, and it flared up and went right out. But of course, I had to pay for the damage. It wasn't that much, but back in those days, at least you could afford to pay for the damage. But anyway, so this particular day, Ray Brown came down into our dressing room. Back in those days, they were wearing string ties, and Ray wanted somebody to tie his tie, so he came down into our dressing room. So Ella must have sensed that he was downstairs in our dressing room. So she says, Ray Brown, get your behind up here right now. So he heard it the first time. He went on upstairs. He disappeared. But nevertheless, I wasn't playing bass in those days. But I want to tell you, when I heard Ray Brown play, and I said to myself, if I was a bass player, that's the way I would want to sound. He had a nice, big, fat, gorgeous sound on his instrument. And he was a good-looking young man, too. I mean, he could sure pull those strings.
Wait a minute. Okay. So you're on the road with all these wonderful dance acts. How about some of the dance acts that were fun to play for?
Let me see a dance act. I was thinking about a comedy act.
Well, that's fine.
Dance act. Something
How
that
about the
comes to
comedy
mind.
act?
There was a comedy act, Miller and Lee, who we used to play with. They were on the roster with us at the Apollo in particular. And I remember one little joke. One of them would be playing Home Sweet Home, and it would sound so bad that his partner would say, "Man, that's terrible." His partner would say, "Well, I come from a terrible home." And another one was let's see. One would say the one would be up in the first tier of the boxes. The first tier of boxes. He'd say, "Hey man, what time are you going on?" "Oh, I'm going on in about 10 minutes." He says, "Okay, I'll be back in 11 minutes." Or it might be Dusty Fletcher.
Oh, open the door, Richard.
Yeah, open the door, Richard. He'd say to his partner would be in the room. He says, "Well, I know my partner ain't going nowhere because I'm wearing the suit." You know, they had one suit between the two of them. But whatever, I mean, he was just a naturally funny man. It was just a joy just to be a part of the audience, just listening to them, even backstage or wherever I happened to be at the time, you know.
How about Pigmeat Markham around here?
Oh, Pigmeat, yeah, Pigmeat was another funny guy. I can't think of one of his jokes, but nevertheless, I always look forward to hearing him, you know, to watching him work.
To go back to the Sweethearts,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned Pauline Brady, was such a wonderful drummer.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, you know, for each of the instruments, would people like Big Sid Catlett come around?
Yes, thank you for the help again. You're batting 100. Yeah, Sid Catlett would come up to check on Pauline and her equipment to make sure she had everything she needed, drumsticks, whatever, you know. But he was like her big brother. He would come and check her out. Yeah, every time we were at the Apollo, Sid would come up. He just seemingly happened to be in town at the same time we were.
Right.
I don't know how he managed that, but nevertheless, I remember Sid Catlett very much.
Who were some of the outstanding instrumentalists in the Sweethearts of Rhythm? Who were the people
Vi Burnside was a star tenor sax player, and she was just a natural, big sound. I mean, she didn't have to work hard at it. She was a natural, you know, a natural musician. And Tiny Davis was another one on trumpet, and she was the clown and the comedian in the Sweethearts of Rhythm, and she sang some of the blues, not all the blues, because Anna Mae Winburn would take over with some of the blues that she would, and she was a gorgeous lady, thin and shapely and very talented. And let me see. Well, those were the three people that were the most outstanding, I think, in the Sweethearts of Rhythm.
Now, wasn't Eddie Durham around the band? Or was
Eddie Durham was not around the band when I was there, but I met Eddie Durham eventually. And then I had to read about him to find out that he, seemingly whenever the ladies musicians were around, you could find Eddie, and he plays, but he wasn't in charge of our band, you know, the contingent that I played with. But I did meet him later on, and he was a lovely man. He was extremely talented, and he was the person who invented well, I guess you can say invented the electric guitar. He was the first one to play electric guitar. I don't know, I guess through an amplifier, with the amplifier. But he liked to work with the lady musicians, and he was an extremely talented man. He played trombone, and in fact, last year, his daughter invited a bunch of us down to San Marcos, Texas. Yes, okay. Dr. Al Vulma is here because he went with us down there, and we played in honor of. And in fact, his daughter Marsha, got this wonderful little museum together with a lot of the artifacts that her father owned, and they're there in the museum down there. And we played a concert in his honor, and we had a wonderful time down there for 2-3 days. We flew down and flew back. It was quite a time. In that short time, she did all these things, and I don't know how she got all that together in such a short time.
She's amazing. She is.
Very attractive lady, and she I don't know where she got all of the energy. Amazing.
I was thinking about you in this band. I have a question. Was there a saxophone player in the band when you were there named Roz Cron?
No, Roz was in the band before I was.
Before you
Yeah,
were.
in fact, we've talked from time to time. But
she's a friend.
yes,
Yeah.
She lives in California, but Roz was in the band a little before I was.
I'm just wondering, once again, if you could just paint a picture for us, because I'm imagining a band of women out on the road.
Isn't that something?
Well, it is. Out. There have been books written about it and about this band, and about different things. But I've read the books, but I'm talking to somebody who's actually there, and so I would just like to get more.
Well, I just want to say a lot of people think that I may be an original. I'm not an original sweetheart of rhythm, but I joined later on.
That's fine.
But a lot of people think that I was an original. But the original Sweethearts, members of the Sweethearts of Rhythm came from Piney Woods, Mississippi, where there was a school for, I can't think of the name of the teacher who taught all these instruments to these girls. And what used to happen was that the band, as such, used to go out and circulate around the environs close to the school, and they began to go further and further away as time went on, and I guess it got good to them, and Miss Jones decided that maybe they would just, I don't know what the decision was that finally had made them start traveling, but they used to promote the school by going out and playing to demonstrate what the young people were learning at the school.
Right.
Yes.
But what I'm interested in is beyond that. People tell stories about those bands, and they're usually just the happy anecdotes or the funny time when they met someone famous or something like that. But I'm wondering, just give us a picture of what it was like to be out on the road with that band at that time. Some of the outstanding incidents that might have happened in any way that you might characterize, but just what were some of the things
Well,
That remain.
okay, let me think of another incident. Well, I remember we went to, there was one, I don't remember the name of the town, but nevertheless we were coming into town to get something to eat. And some of the girls in the band could pass for white. So I said to a couple of the girls one day, I said, well, gee, if you want to get a halfway decent meal, why don't you go to one of the white restaurants? They're not going to know the difference. So actually what I did was, when they went into the restaurant and sat down, I waved at them through the window. and nobody could do anything about it. So I was safe there, but nevertheless, I was just being devilish, really. But actually, we were invited to a lot of private homes and got some very fine home-cooked meals, I want to tell you. But it was really nice, generally speaking, to have that experience of what it was like to go from this side of the railroad tracks to that side of the railroad tracks and conduct yourself accordingly, you know. But nobody ever got into trouble with anybody. Everybody remained calm and cool because the girls had been traveling long before I had, you know. And of course, with my inexperience, just joining the band, I was about as green as, I don't know, I don't see anybody wearing anything green, but I was just as green as any color green could be, but I kept my mouth shut and kept my eyes open, and I learned a lot.
You mentioned the Juilliard School,
Mhm.
and your father and yourself there.
Yeah.
Where was the school located when you went there, and what did you study?
Well, the Juilliard School was located up on 122nd Street and Broadway, where the present Manhattan School of Music is. In fact, my father went to that particular location too. And some of the books that he used in his theory and keyboard work, I used those same textbooks when I went there 25 years later. And I still have those books too, come to think of it. But it was the kind of school where I went there to be a piano major, which I eventually got into in the diploma course. But I had to do some work during the summertime and study with this particular teacher, Harold Lewis. He was a wonderful teacher, wonderful, very patient. But he knew how to push my buttons to make me practice. And I got into the diploma department, the diploma course. You have to take an exam. And Juilliard had nothing but Steinway pianos in the practice rooms, in the performance rooms. And each piano had its own personality. And usually when you went to your exam, as a piano major, I would, they'd give you like 10 minutes, say, to get used to the piano action, because each piano had its own personality, just like human beings. But the thing is that they give you time to get used to the piano, and then, of course, you played your prepared pieces. And I was lucky enough to get into the diploma department, and I had a teacher named Gordon Stanley. He was a very fine teacher, but I was wondering what he was doing. Yeah, I'll show you. But nevertheless, it was a good lesson in discipline, getting things done properly. But my mind told me in my graduation year to go into composition. And I had a chance to study with Vittorio Giannini, who was then a wonderful composer. And I had people in my class like, he's still alive, and both of them are. One of them became a protege of Stravinsky.
Robert Kraft.
Robert Kraft. Oh boy, you're good.
I should be on Jeopardy or something.
Robert Kraft. And anyway, in any case, it was the kind of thing that, it was the kind of experience that I don't think I would have exchanged for anything else, because it gave me all the things that I needed to get out into the world, you know, without feeling inadequate. And so, but there was one little particular incident. One of my colleagues who was also a teacher studying with Mr. Stanley, Gordon Stanley, the pianist, she decided to change teachers and go to another piano teacher. Now, in the back of my mind, I knew that if I did that, there would be some trouble down the line, because you see, if you as a student go to another teacher in the same department, stuff can happen. Well, stuff happened to this other young lady. I remember one day we were walking through the hallways. I was on my way to a class, and she was on her way to her class, wherever that was. And Mr. Stanley was coming toward us from the opposite direction. He spoke to me, but he ignored her. just because of that incident, you know, it was just one of those things. And also, there was another little fun thing that we used to do. One of our piano colleagues, I can see his face right now. He had not made graduation, even though he was graduating, but he had forgotten about graduation because he had a recording session with Ella Fitzgerald. So he didn't get his sheepskin until the next week. He did get it. I mean, he graduated, but not with the rest of the graduating class. Oh, maybe you might be able to help me out with this. Don't laugh. This could happen to you.
What did he play?
Piano. Dark brown skin work, thick glasses.
Ray tuning?
Pardon?
Ray tuning?
No. It'll continue. But you've done well up to now, Loren. So I'll let you go on this one. But nevertheless, it was a wonderful experience, and also at that particular period of time, the country was in the Second World War. So we used to call Juilliard the Juilliard Seminary of Music, rather than Juilliard School of Music, because all the guys were gone. Most of the guys were in the army or some service.
So this is before you went with the Sweethearts, and before Erskine Hawkins, or after?
Yes, before.
That's before. So the trajectory is where did you go to high school?
Wadley High School. Which,
Oh, so you went to Wadley?
Yeah.
Which has a great music program now. I
Yeah,
understand.
well, they had a great music program then, too. And Joyce Brown was one of the, well, she called herself Millicent in those days. Millicent was her first name, Joyce Brown. When she became professional, and she dropped the Millicent and just became Joyce Brown. But Joyce became a very fine conductor on Broadway. And I had the pleasure of working with her in Purley. I subbed for Bobby Bushnell, who was a very, very fine bass player. But unfortunately, the alcohol kind of took over. Unfortunately, it affected his heart. And so he passed. Handsome young man, play the heck out of that bass. But nevertheless, unfortunately, he passed far too early in his career.
So you went to Wadley, and then from Wadley to Juilliard,
Mm-hmm.
and then from Juilliard into the bands. And Erskine Hawkins was first?
Yes, no, Sweethearts was first, and Erskine Hawkins. And then later on, I decided I wanted to study voice. So I decided to go to the Manhattan School of Music to work on my master's degree, and I studied with John Brownlee, who at that time was the one of the star baritones at the Metropolitan Opera House, and he was also the president of AGMA. AGMA at the time, American Guild of Musical Artists. Yes, and so sometimes he would have to go off and negotiate something, negotiate a contract here or there, but he always made up my lessons. I never missed a lesson. He was a wonderful man. He's from Australia, and he studied with let me see, his voice teacher was a very famous soprano. Anyway, he also, I think, eventually became the president of the Manhattan School of Music too. He was a very beloved man.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Carline, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
And I was talking with our co-producer, Greg Thomas, during the break, and you've presented us with a wonderful problem. And the problem is that your career and your life is so varied that the amount of time that we have tonight, we've decided that it's probably best not to do a quick gloss on all the different things that you've done, but just we're going to keep focusing on, on the various components and just beg you to come back for part 2.
Well, I'd be very happy.
And we would like to do that probably even in January, because we've started an educational program, as Greg mentioned, which actually Greg is running, at the Frederick Douglass Academy, and we're going to have a panel day on January 14th, I think the date is. And, well, I mean, and if that date's not
Is that a
good,
Thursday too?
no, it's a Saturday.
A Saturday?
But we'll find another date if that.
No, whatever, no, we'll see.
I would love to have you come and participate in that one.
Okay.
So to pick it up, where we left off, we were I was getting the chronology straight about school and then which band and with Erskine Hawkins' band and then with the Sweethearts? Or no,
No,
the
Sweethearts were first,
Okay,
and then Erskine Hawkins.
right. What happened after the Sweethearts and after Erskine Hawkins?
Well, I went to the Manhattan School of Music and got my master's in voice. As I said, I studied with John Brownlee,
Yes.
and it was a wonderful experience. I wanted to be proficient in voice because I found myself to be a natural singer, but I wanted to hone my skills so that I would be, because being a contralto slash baritone, which is what I am actually.
If you don't understand, that's unheard of. I'm serious, it's absolutely unique what she just said. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, actually, my lower range is commensurate to the range of a baritone, because in all the choruses that I have sung in over the years, I'm usually either singing tenor, baritone, in some cases bass, if when needed, you know, for emphasis or whatever the case may be. But nevertheless, the teachers that I've gone to, excuse me, after I graduated from the Manhattan School of Music, one of my beloved colleagues, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, got me. In fact, I met Perky at the Manhattan School, and Perky got me with. I didn't ask him, but he insisted that I study with Claire Gelder, who was a fabulous. I called her Sergeant Gelder because she was used to giving orders, you know. But she was a wonderful voice teacher, and I had the experience of my life vocally, trying to do what she asked me to do. It's the kind of thing where one day the light bulb goes on, and you say, "Oh, that's what she meant," that kind of thing, you know. And all of a sudden, your voice starts to, when you continue to work at it, your voice begins to fall, things begin to fall into place. And I remember one concert that I sang, it was the Brahms Alto Rhapsody.
Oh.
And I did that with Olin Gaston, who was, for those of you who may, that name may be familiar to you, he was the organist of a church in Queens. I cannot remember the name of the church. I may have the program at home. I'm an old pack rat, you know, so I keep all the old programs and things. But Olin was a fabulous organist, choir master, and he invited me to come and do the solo, the contralto solo, the Brahms Rhapsody, and I had a chance to sing with Joyce Mathis. Some of you may remember Joyce Mathis. She and I did the duet from the Vivaldi's Gloria, and I was so honored to sing with her. But she just unfortunately became ill. I don't know what her illness was, but I just was so very sad when she passed, because I was just getting to know her, you know, and she was somebody whose talents I admired no end, and to get a chance to sing with her, wow! But when I sang the Brahms Alto Rhapsody with Olin Gaston, that was one time when I knew I was sounding very good. I mean, I felt so comfortable, and everything that my teacher had taught me, that Miss Gelder had taught me, fell into place that day like you would not believe. It's one of those kind of things, you know. But nevertheless, as you can hear, I probably get called sir on the phone more than most of the guys in the room here. How's the never, as we say down home. I have always been very, since God gave me this voice, I've always been very diligent about wanting to share it. I like to share my talents because I'm not going to be around forever and a day, and nobody is. But nevertheless, I like to, I like the enjoyment of sharing what God gave me. But and I've been very blessed with my education and all that sort of thing. But that's one reason why I now enjoy teaching at the new school. I sub for Junior Mance whenever he has to go out of town. And Junior is a wonderful, such a nice man. Oh. And so he never tells me what to do when I go to class to teach. And I've been doing this, I've been helping Junior out for about, 10 years now or so. But it's a pleasure. I love working with young people. I just, it's just something that I just want to give back, and I want to see the young people succeed. But they have to find their own way. But I'm trying to get them to understand, with all the classes that I teach, I've honed my skills, teaching skills, from the Jazzmobile. And it seems as though here lately, in the last 10, 12, 15 years, when I think about something and wish for it to happen, sooner or later it happens. So I must be on the right wavelength with the man upstairs. However,
I'm going to have to give you some reading material about the Jazz Museum.
okay. I see
Maybe a little
with that
dream
hand going there. I see you have things in mind.
Wow.
Okay, well, I'll be very happy to, whatever I can do to help, because I think it's very important to, although each generation, maybe every 10, 15, 20 years, new things come into this music we call jazz. You really can't pinpoint any one particular thing, because each generation makes its contributions, And I love to stay in tune with what's going on, even though my primary interest, jazz-wise, was from the old school, with the Count Basies and the Duke Ellingtons and so forth. And speaking about Duke Ellington and that particular era, back in the 70s, now this is further on down the line, I have actually been, everybody that I've played with are people that I've been asked to play with. I don't solicit jobs. At least I haven't had to up to now anyway. But now that I'm 80 years old, I'm really beginning to really enjoy myself, And it's really it's meaningful to me to help young people and pass my experiences on and help them in their way, to advance themselves with whatever it is they have in mind to do. But, just like each one of you in the room here has something special about you. Now, if you were a singer, if I were speaking to you from that standpoint, I would say each one of you has something special about you, but it's up to you to find out what that is. Now, vocally speaking, let's say, for instance, if you hear Carmen McRae, Ella Fitzgerald, Bobby Short, Tony Bennett, anybody vocally now, just vocally I'm speaking, well, maybe instrumentally too. They have arrived when you don't have to see them in order to know who they are. They are identifiable by something they do, the way they turn a phrase, or whatever, just like with certain instrumentalists. You can tell who's who. So when you don't have to see them with your eyes, but just listen to them and catch something identifiable about them, whether it's the timbre of their voices or whatever, they have arrived. And so that same thing has to pertains to each one of you. If each one of you were a vocalist and an instrumentalist too, same thing. I know I would know Mary Lou by a certain way she does things. Marion McPartland, Ella Fitzgerald, Maxine Sullivan, or any of these people, which are all people that I've worked with. Gee whiz, I come to think of it, you're right. I have my experiences are so varied, and I enjoy the variety. That's what motivates me. I enjoy the variety.
Well, one thing in writing, you've been involved with unions.
Am I involved with you? Yes. Well, I happen to be a member of the trial board at Local 802. You have a friend at Local 802, in case you ever have to come before the trial board. I've been a member of the trial board since 1989, I think it is. But I did get off. I dropped out one session, which was a term of 2 years, because at the time the union was not paying that much attention to jazz musicians, and I was a little incensed. So I decided to step down for a term, and I was asked to come back and join the trial board again at the next election, because things were really beginning to move in the direction of jazz musicians who were beginning to get a little more respect at that time. So I was happy to return. I'm still on the trial board. I don't know how long I'm going to be there, but nevertheless, we now serve 3-year terms now, rather than 2-year terms. Yeah. So.
We had an interview here a couple of months ago with Roy Haynes.
Oh yeah, he and I the same age. Yeah.
Okay.
He when he first came to New York, my husband gave him his first job. He tells me. Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Well, that's why I mentioned it, because when he got out of the car, our mutual friend Al Vollmer, who's right over there, who's the founder of the Harlem Blues and Jazz Band, went up to him with a photograph. And in fact, later on when you leave, let's see, there's the Roy Haynes pictures right behind Miss Carmen.
Oh yeah.
You can point to him. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And point to the center, the old picture in the center there. He came out with a picture that was signed to the guy who got him the gig, who was Charlie Holmes.
Oh yeah, Charlie.
And it says, and the picture says at the bottom, drummer boy, Roy Haynes.
Yes.
And Roy looked older in that picture than he looks now. And so I was wondering if we could modulate for a moment to one of the great figures in jazz history, from Panama to New Orleans to New York to around the world. Who's your husband?
Yeah, well, my husband was from Panama, a little town called Bocas del Toro, the mouth of the bull. And he was born in 1902. So this 2002, if he was still living, he would have been 100 years old. 23 years older than me. Panama, some young man down in Panama had developed this organization in honor of my husband. And I was invited down to Panama to help them celebrate his 100th birthday at the time, 2002. And I got a chance to, in Panama City, I got a chance to meet the mayor of Panama City. Quite an honor. I thought I was the Queen of Sheba the way they were treating me. It was very nice, lovely experience. And I got a chance to meet the mayor of, Panama City. I was taken to the university, the local university there, to meet people from the music department. And one of the gentlemen, who was the head of the music department, immediately showed me an old album of my husband's and asked me to autograph it. And it's still in very good shape. He obviously, takes good care of his things. And then
What's your husband's name?
Louis Russell.
Oh, thank you.
L-U-I-S is the way he spelled his first name. Russell, R-U-S-S-E-L-L. Louis Carl Russell. That was his middle name. And so he was one of the first, if not the first, recognized jazz musician from Panama to make it here in the States. He was he used to play in he used to play piano in the movie theaters for silent movies in those days. That's how far back it went. And so the way he got to this country was he won a lottery for $3,000. Now in those days, $3,000 went a long way. Yeah, he came with his, excuse me, came with his mother and his sister, and he went straight to New Orleans. Met a lot of those musicians there, played with them, and he eventually met Louis Armstrong. And
He played with King Oliver, didn't he?
oh yes. You do your homework. You do all right. Loren, very good. Yes,
Did he
thank
talk
you.
about King Oliver at all?
Not that I can remember, but I used to look in the history, in the jazz history books myself, and see, some of the pictures, and then read the what they had to say about the bands that Lou played with. And also, I have a letter at home when Louis Armstrong was sending for my husband to come to Chicago, I believe it was, and he signed it, "Red beans and ricingly yours." Louis Armstrong. Yeah, that's the way he signed it. So, in any case, it was, my husband didn't speak that much about himself, but I read about him. I had to do that, in order to be on a knowledgeable level with him, because he didn't talk that much about himself. He was a very modest man. The way I met him, incidentally, was at a club in Brooklyn. It was across from McBride College. Town Hill. Thank you, Kat. Yeah, you saved me that time again. Somebody's always saving me. Town Hill. Thank you. Yes, that was where I met my husband. Actually, he was my boss, and the three of us, Edna Smith, bass player, as I mentioned before, Pauline Brady on drums, and myself on piano. I was playing piano then too, and we played in the back room. This was a big place, good food, and we actually started playing out in the front bar, and that's how we got to be known. In fact, a lot of people used to come just out of curiosity, seeing three women playing jazz, because a lot of people have never seen a woman even play an instrument. So we had a good time doing that, and met my husband. Well, at the time he was my boss. I was Mr. Ray and he was Mr. Russell. But nobody knew that we were keeping company or going out together and all that sort of thing. But and then he was a very good cook, Caribbean style. And so things happened, and the next year we were married. Kathy was born in 1956, and we got a chance to, later on. Oh, there's a documentary, if some of you have seen the documentary about Louis Armstrong. At the very beginning of the documentary, Louis Armstrong is holding up a little girl, and she's looking at him as to say, "That's Kathy. That's my daughter." Yeah, because we had gone to Louis Armstrong, we had been invited to Louis Armstrong's house for dinner when, this was in the early 60s, and my husband and I took our Bell and Howell movie camera, and I think those pictures that you see at the very beginning were taken by my husband. And Kathy she didn't know who Louis Armstrong. She said she was only about 3 or 4 years old, and she was looking at him at arm's length, just to say, "Who are you?" But anyway, so that's another part of the history, and we had dinner that night and had a good time, and Lucille was very gracious, and this is at the house out there in Corona that is now the museum, the Louis Armstrong Museum. Let's see, 3456 107th Avenue. I remember. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the way I remember it. So, but anyway, so Louis Armstrong was very gracious. We had a good time, and he always gave pictures of himself, 8x10s, sitting on a commode with Swiss Chris advertised.
Which was a laxative.
Yes.
I heard a story, I think in the same movie that I've seen, which I never realized that it was this woman right here I'm looking at who Louis Armstrong's holding in that famous film.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's my daughter right
Yeah,
there.
I know.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
okay.
And
Bless you. Salud.
in that same film, Louis tells a story. No, Tony Bennett tells a story about how they went to visit the royal family in England,
Uh-huh.
and Louis supposedly always carried the Swiss Chris with him, and would always just talk to people about it and say, I take this and
We
it works.
believe in this.
And so supposedly, he had a whole bunch of packets of it on the table, and he ran to Johnny came back, and just had the whole royal. All the people at the table had thought of some kind of tea or something like that. And they'd all sat, drank it, and they had to call the royal physician. I mean, I won't take it any further than that, but
I thought maybe we were going to say royal flush. I was waiting for you to say that.
and it was a royal flush, for sure. Oh my God. But I have a question. Did people like Red Allen, Charlie Holmes, Paul Barberin,
Yes.
all those people who had come to fame in your husband's band back in the 20s and the 30s?
Yeah, I had a chance to meet a lot of them, and JC, right. Well, some of them used to, when my husband became ill, he had cancer, prostate cancer. And when he got to the place where he was bedridden, some people used to come to the house to visit. So I got a chance to meet, Charlie Holmes used to live up on 150th Street. And actually, after my husband died, I gave Charlie some of my husband's suits because they were about as close size-wise as, to make it possible for me to give away some of this clothing. But I remember one night, Louis Armstrong and his wife had come from a recording date, and they came up to the house. I was living up on 187th Street between Amsterdam and Audubon Avenues at that time because my husband had been working as a chauffeur for the president of Yeshiva University. And all the employees not all the employees, but some of the employees that worked right there at the university, Yeshiva University, lived in this little brownstone on West 187th Street, and we were on the top floor, and then there was a Spanish family on the floor below us, and then the German Jewish family on the ground floor. And so I used to call our house the Little United Nations, and so. And then we didn't, all those employees, none of those employees had to pay rent. That was all part of the job, with the apartment. But when my husband got to the place where he was bedridden and couldn't get around much anymore, unless I had to take him to the doctor for whatever reason. And so one night, Louis Armstrong and his wife came to the house, and they had a nice conversation with Lou, and when they left, Louis Armstrong shook my husband's hand, and when he opened his hand, there was a $100 bill in it. Louis Armstrong had given him a $100 bill. Anyway, but we had, at that time, we were going, our church was on 155th Street and between Amsterdam and Broadway, the North Presbyterian Church. That's where we were dues-paying members. And that's where my husband's funeral was. So I had to bring up, after that, I brought up my daughter by myself, she was the only one I had to practice on, so I had to do the best I could for her. And she turned out very well, I must say. Nothing that I necessarily had to, because I was just playing it by ear, so to speak, when you only got one child, you do the best you can. But nevertheless, I'm very proud of her. She's turned out very well. And she had a chance to go to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and she did very well there. But that's when the discipline is a very important thing. at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, you don't go from year to year automatically. You have to qualify each year, and that's what I was so proud of her for that, because she did all the work herself. I had nothing to do with it except see that she got in there, hopefully, which happened eventually, because she was going out to California to visit friends of hers out there, and she got a chance to go to college out there, and she met, she was in a production that starred Odetta, and Odetta was a very strong influence on Catherine, and so she had a chance to develop on her own the way she. And in those days in California, you could go to college from out of state, from another state, and get tuition privileges. Is that how does that work?
Residency.
A residency, okay. If you're there for a year. Oh yeah, that's the way that worked in those days. This is back in the 70s, I think. But in any case, so the thing is that with all the things that have happened to me in my life, I just sort of take things as they come and handle them as best I can and learn something from them. And of course, everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But I only had the one chance to make it go of it for Kathy. But everything turned out all right. And so I'm very proud of the fact that with no influence from me, I didn't beat her over the head just like my folks didn't beat me over the head to be a professional musician. I did it because I wanted to, and I let Kathy do what she wanted to the way she wanted to. Because that's the only way that I think a child can progress properly, in my estimation, by letting them do what they do best, the way they want to do it. And they can develop the way they want to develop, and that's it. And so after that, to get back to the progression of what I was doing, after a while I was thinking about Skitch Henderson now, because he used to be in the office with Jerry Kravitz. You remember Jerry Kravitz? And so one day I got a call while Kathy was at camp. I got a call to join the band. It wasn't the Skitch Henderson band per se, but it was a band that played a lot of the gigs around this area in the hotels and so forth. And so, since I was the only, I wasn't the only female in the band. The vocalist also was the other lady in the band, and I used to go pick her up at her house, and we'd go to whatever gigs we had to go to. But that was one very interesting situation, because I had a chance to play with guys who, and in fact, the band was such that everybody knew. We kept up with all of the current, whatever the popular songs of the day were, plus a lot of the old repertoire. And the band was such that we didn't need to have charts. Everybody knew seemingly all of the different kinds of tunes that we would have to play as a band. And we also played for a lot of the big acts that came into New York, like Sammy Davis Jr. and his dad, and the rest of the group. And Sammy Davis's father used to say that he loved to come to New York because there were such good musicians here, which I thought was very nice of him to say, because actually, their charts were such that they would like to have them as close to the way they were written on the charts as was possible. Nevertheless, after Skitch Henderson's band, then I became acquainted with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, because they were doing Mary Lou Williams' Jazz Mass. And so Mary Lou asked me to join her, actually, as a part of her trio. This was in 1971. And so for 31 years, I've been doing Alvin Ailey. I just stopped this past last December. But that was quite an experience, too. And Mary Lou was like my big sister, and we're both under the same sign, Taurus, the bull. Hard-headed people, hard-headed but loyal. Oh yes. So I learned a lot. She was like my mentor, you know, and I learned a lot from her, and had the honor and privilege of working with her, and recording with her, and so forth.
What were
So-
some of the things that you learned from her?
Well, she taught me about not just teaching me, but I used to watch her and listen. I used to do a lot of listening to the way she, the way she memorized, the way she would harmonize a tune, and I got used to hearing substitutions and things like that. And in other words, the chords that she would use were correct, but they were not what I would expect to hear ordinarily. But they taught me to be very flexible in my musical thinking, and get to some of the more interesting chords and things that really enhance a piece of music, enhance a tune. And so that's the way I got to play more on my bass, getting used to doing these sorts of things. And she let me sing. She asked me, in fact, to sing some of the things from her, and I recorded too some of the things from her mass, the Mary Lou's Mass. And in fact, this past year, 2004, I had a dream of mine, a wish that came to fruition by singing some of Mary Lou's music with Wynton Marsalis and the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. That was with Peter O'Brien asked me to do all that kind of thing, and that was, I'm still on cloud 9 with that, because that was, and the guys in the band are so nice. They were so nice. And Wynton, and Andy Bay was one of the other vocalists, and the pianist, the guest pianist was Mulgrew Miller.
Oh.
Yeah, and Mulgrew and I played in the Duke Ellington band together. That's how I met him. And with the Duke Ellington band, now that's something else interesting too, because I got with the Duke Ellington band while in one of the seasons of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. What Alvin was doing was asking the band to play, the Duke Ellington band, to play Duke Ellington music. We were doing, and that's how I got to learn some of the other music that you don't hear as much, other than the popular things that everybody knows, a lot of his suites. And I got a chance to sing, and then that's when Joyce Brown was conducting some of that time too, with the Alvin Ailey, for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. And Alvin would choreograph a lot of that wonderful music. But one of my favorite works of Duke's that you don't get to hear often is The River. Yes. And the bass parts are just fabulous. I just had so much fun, and I learned so much. And that's what I like about what I'm doing, is because I'm learning. I'm still learning. You never stop learning, if you keep your mind flexible and open. And so my life is just, and career is just a work in progress. I just keep on going,
Well, that seems like a natural segue to the next part of this evening's presentation, which is where we open up for questions and answers and comments from the audience. And I know there's a lot of people here tonight who came to see you, so we would like to give you the opportunity to please say something. We'd like to begin with the president of the Duke Ellington Society, Ray Carmen. He said, don't say doctor.
Want the mic back?
No. You mentioned when you were talking about Ray Brown, you weren't playing the bass. When did you take up the bass?
Oh, that's a good question. I meant to answer that question further back. Good question, Ray. Edna Smith again comes up. This was at Town Hill. You remember when I talked about Town Hill? Okay, Edna used to bring her upright bass to work, but one night she came in with this Fender bass, And I was so intrigued to see a Fender bass looking like a guitar. Like it was like the bottom 4 strings of a 6-string guitar, and I was really intrigued with it. And what used to happen before we would start the evening's musical performance out at the bar, a bunch of us would get together. There was a group that was playing in the back room for dinner, and we were out at the bar. Well, Frank Anderson, who was one of my husband's best friends, and also his best man at his wedding, at our wedding. He's a fabulous pianist, and so he and I would get together. In fact, I just wanted to play Edna's bass. I mean, as soon as Edna came in, I would take her bass and start fooling around with it, because I had been familiar with the 6-string guitar from the Sweethearts of Rhythm. So that's how my transition to electric bass happened. And so everybody would say, no, don't stop. So we would be playing and have a little session like before we started our official evening's music. So that's how I got to play. That Fender bass and I just got along famously. And so after a while, I began to get called for gigs other than playing at Town Hill. And then my husband bought me a Fender bass of my own. In those days, the Fender bass was not popular. Nobody knew about it that much, but I really enjoyed playing it because it just seemed natural for me. It just fell under my fingers. I just loved it so much, and I still have my bass. Still have my Fender bass, and this was before Columbia, as the saying goes, before Columbia took over the company. But nevertheless, that was quite an innovation. But back in those days, nobody knew that much about electric bass. And my husband had an old electric bass that I used to play on before I got my Fender. But nevertheless, that's how that started. Yeah, that was back around in the early 50s.
Over here.
Have you and your daughter traveled and done many projects here, abroad, wherever?
Yes, we traveled abroad with Carrie Smith. For those of you who remember Carrie Smith, yeah, we did quite a few tours with Carrie over in Europe. And how that happened was that Carrie used to always go to Europe as a jazz singer. But one year, she decided to go as a gospel singer, because she was just as good at that too. And so she wanted to get this group together. So we used to rehearse, several times a week, sometimes at my house, sometimes in a rented studio someplace in the area here. And one day, she had a young lady, her first name was Connie, and Connie was very good at singing alone, but when she had to sing with other people in harmony, something went wrong, would go wrong. She would not be in tune, or something was wrong. But anyway, so we were preparing for this gospel tour in Europe, going to France, Germany, Italy, all over the place. And so I had stayed in touch with Carrie so that I would know when she wanted the rhythm section to come in. She was just rehearsing the singers at that particular time. So I said to her, I said, I have a daughter who sings too, and she sings the heck out of gospel, for one thing. And so Carrie said, she produced this tape from nowhere. I mean, actually, almost like a magician. She says, well, will you give this tape to your daughter and tell her to be at rehearsal on Monday at 1:00? It's cut the following Monday. This was like a Friday, So I said, I'll be very happy to. When I got home, I thought I'd have to scrape Kathy off the ceiling. She was so happy. Now, her discipline from being a student at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts served her in good stead, because she had that tape down pat. And when we got to rehearsal on Monday, the pianist, Andre Franklin, said to Kathy, "Where have you been?" You know, as if to say, "Wow," you know. So, and Kathy has perfect pitch too, so she was in tune with everything. Everything just fell into place. And so we went on tour. Well, we did 2 tours, one in '87 and one in '89, I think it was. In any case, they were both very successful tours, and we were very happy. And I think that's something that Carrie always remembers, and we do, because we have a lot of the rehearsal tapes and things, and it was most pleasurable, and I was very happy to be a part of that.
Other questions, comments, sir?
Question, I always remember Louis Russell as a big band. Who was his vocal and vocalist? I can't think of that.
Lee Richardson. Lee Richardson was his one of his well-known vocalists. In fact, at the time that my husband had his own band.
Sonny Woods.
Oh, Sonny Woods too. That's right. Yeah, but I didn't know Sonny Woods, but I knew Lee Richardson. That's why I remembered him. Remember the name because because of the fact that he he participated in one of the couple of the hits that my husband had at that time. "Don't Take Your Love From Me" and one other one. Might have been "The Very Thought of You," but one of the old golden oldies, you know. And so I don't remember what happened to Lee after that. That was sometime. Well, that was before I even had even knew my husband. You know, I knew him by his band and the hits that he had and all that sort of thing. But I didn't meet. I met Lee Richardson, but I didn't, and I wasn't involved with my husband at the time. You know, yeah.
How many pieces do they have in that band?
Oh, maybe 14, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, big band. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just have to tell the audience, for those that there's all the classic Louis Armstrong records that you know from the 1930s, all of them from 1935 on. It's the Louis Russell Band. So I mean,
Oh, yes,
you may not recognize that name, but you don't know, but you've all heard them because they're among the most famous records ever made.
Well, Louis Armstrong used to front my husband's band.
Right.
And then my husband did all the paperwork. He didn't want to be bothered. Louis Armstrong didn't want to be bothered with all the bookkeeping and all that stuff. My husband was very meticulous about that kind of thing.
Any other questions, comments?
You've mentioned that people would come out to see you play, 3 women playing jazz, because that in itself was different. Can you give us some sort of idea what it was like to be a pioneer of your gender?
I never thought of myself as a pioneer. I was just doing what I enjoyed doing.
But was it different being a woman? Did you feel it was different?
Well, in some instances, it might have been because a lot of people, like I remember one time I was going on a gig in Jersey with Wally Richardson. You remember Wally Richardson, guitar player? And I was carrying my instrument, and we were going downstairs on an elevator to a big, like a big community room where this dance was being held. And so some gentleman came up to me. He says, "Oh, are you the vocalist with the band?" I said, "No, sir, I'm the bass player." He said, "Oh, yeah, okay." So that was the kind of reaction I would get all the time. So when I got downstairs and I was, setting up my stuff, and he heard us play a set or two, so he came over and apologized to me for that reaction, because he thought I was carrying the instrument for somebody else. So I mean, and it happens all the time. Like in my building where I live, somebody would see me with my upright bass and say, "Oh, you play that?" And I looked around the elevator. I said, "I don't see anybody else in here." That kind of thing, But I have a more or less a smart aleck remark for whatever happens, And so most of the time, I mean, it's just, this is one of those things. You learn how to deal with it,
Can I share mine with you?
Sure.
I'm a saxophone player. And
A very good one, I
well,
guess.
but when you said that you have your smart aleck responses for those questions that we all get all the time as musicians, and after a while they're a bit wearing. I have a horrible one, which I'll share with you,
Okay.
because I don't know what, I'll have the chance to say this in public again. You'll be in an elevator or getting onto an airplane with a saxophone case, and you're walking and you're going, and someone says, "Oh, why don't you take it out and play for us?" Right? You get that
Yes,
all the time,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
So I go to open it. And I'd say, actually, I'm not a saxophone player. I'd say I'm a proctologist.
I like that.
Sorry.
Yeah. Ba-dum-bum.
He didn't get the point, though.
Edit the tape.
He didn't get the point.
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't get it.
Nice
What,
try.
I think
Nice
that-
try.
What?
He's trying to extend your
A
joke.
pun. He didn't get the point.
Oh, gee. Get him out of here. Oh, my God. Oh. On that note, I started it, so I can't complain. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Ray? Yes.
Just about the Savoy, and you said you were talking to other guitarists about going for a job with the Erskine Hawkins band.
Yeah.
I might have missed a link there or something, but then you finished up singing with it.
Yes, I did get the job, singing with the band.
Yeah. But
I was taking the place of Laura Washington, who had been the she had a hit or two with the band. But yes, I got the job.
no, what I mean is, all right, I misunderstood you then. Sorry, I thought you'd gone there to get us, a musician's job, playing job rather than.
Well, the singer is a
Or did you do
musician.
both?
The singer is a vocal musician.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I got the job. That was the point. Now, that was my reason. I was going at a special invitation from the guitarist because he had mentioned to me on the road, when we were all on the road together, he had mentioned to me, well, the next time you come back to New York, when you have a time, come around to the Savoy because we're going to be there such and such and such a time. And I want you to sing for Hawk. So that was it. So I sang for him and I got the job.
Was that before or after Della Reese?
Della Reese?
Yeah.
Della Reese wasn't involved with this. Della Reese? I didn't.
I don't think that she sang with Erskine Hawkins.
No, not that I know of. Della Reese didn't sing with Erskine
Well, she
Hawkins.
said she did an autobiography.
She said she did? Well, I mean, she may have sung with him before or after I did, but I wasn't aware
She's
of the
done
fact.
for 18 months. Yeah.
18 months? Oh, that's a possibility. But did she say what the time?
Well, the interesting thing is she says that he only allowed her to sing 4 songs and she hated him for it. But she said at the end of the period, she suddenly realized what he did for her, that he taught her expression and reworking the same material and all the rest of it. And she built the rest of her career on that.
Well, that was benefit for her too.
Yeah.
Doctor in the back, yes, sir.
Hi, Carline. When you were doing Mary Lou Williams' votive masterpiece, and you did a beautiful job, you have to hear the recording she did with Lazarus, the song of Lazarus and Rich Man. When you did it, were you doing it in costume, or did Albinelli have the dancers?
No,
doing
no
it?
costume. No, we were in the pit.
So you were just in the pit?
Yes.
But it wasn't done in costume with the story, the rich man woman with the dancers at all?
Oh well, no. What I was doing was in the pit was doing a musical version of what they were doing on stage. In other words, they were dramatizing what I was singing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, about Lazarus and the poor man and so forth. Blah blah blah. Yeah.
I should mention that our friend here, who just asked the question, just recently received his PhD
Yes.
in the music of Mary Lou Williams. So we need more people like
I congratulated him earlier. I'm very proud of you.
She helped me a great deal.
Thank you.
Well, we have a couple of announcements and things that we'd like to announce as we head around third base here. Dr. Al Vollmer, did you want to come up and make an announcement about something that I think...
Well, I think first I'd like to say that.
Why don't you take the mic?
First, I'd like to say something about Carline's husband, Louis Russell. The reason why Armstrong fronted that band was because it was one of the greatest bands that ever existed. The recordings that were made under the Louis Russell Band in the 29 and 30s could stand up against the Hot Fives, the Hot Sevens, the 1926 Jelly Roll Mortons, and the Louis Russells. They had some band. Henry Allen was on trumpet, Higginbotham was on trombone, Charlie Holmes on alto sax, and on clarinet they had Albert Nicholas, Pops Foster was on bass, Paul Barberin on the drums, and it was one fantastic band. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you. That was a fact of life that I found out too. So many of the members of the band, in fact, let me embarrass myself by not remembering the name of this gentleman, but I have to look it up again. So, anyway, but the guys in the band seemed to be very proud of the fact that they were in a band that was so together. You know, they had the spirit. You know.
Well, Metcalf preceded Allen, so he even had Louis Metcalf at one time.
I remember about Louis Metcalf at your house.
Trumpeter, yes.
Yeah.
Al, you also wanted to make an announcement about that.
Well, that's a sad note, and that is that our pianist in the Harlem Blues and Jazz Band, Lloyd Mayers, who took over the piano chair when Duke Ellington died, he now has died. And he died on November 4th, and we're having a memorial for him at St. Peter's Church on Sunday, November 27th. That's the Sunday right after Thanksgiving at 7:30. So we hope that many of you will come to honor Lloyd Mayers. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say something very surprising and lovely happened during the intermission. Someone who prefers to remain anonymous in the audience here came up and with a check for a few $100s has started a Carline Ray Scholarship Fund.
Oh. I don't know who that is, but thank you very much. My goodness, thank you.
So I would like to say that on behalf of the Jazz Museum, we'd be honored to be the organization with it, and you can decide.
Well, I'd be honored because
who
it's in
gets
Harlem, which is my hometown, my home territory. Yes, absolutely.
So we're shooting right out to the future with this thing, and would like to invite you back for part 2, either at the Frederick Douglass
very happy
Academy
to accommodate.
or here. And we're going to take a picture. I'm going to ask Wilhelmina and Greg to come up, and we're going to present Ms. Ray with our plaque here, or our framed thing. So we'll do this, and then we'll thank her one more time.
Wow.
Okay, thank you.
Wow.
This is yours. Why don't we all get together and thank this wonderful person?